Stephen Kurkjian is a native of Boston and a graduate of its public school system. He enjoyed a 40-year career at the Boston Globe, a founding member and later chief of the Globe's investigative spotlight team. He won 3 Pulitzer Prizes as a member of the team. He has covered the investigation into the 1990 museum theft as a member of the Globe, and following his retirement, wrote the much acclaimed Master Thieves, the Boston Gangsters who pulled off the world's biggest art heist. So we are privileged today to have Stephen here.
Okay, so I can see also the participants. A box that has the participants. Is that showing up as well?
No.
Okay, good.
That's everybody's individual
Okay,
computer will determine if they see them or not.
okay, so you can all see the museum there.
Yes.
That's the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum that has consumed so much of my life. This is a copy of my hardback, which came out. Let me enter. Okay. This is a copy of the hardback. It came out in 2015. The subhead is really the most important. The Boston Gangsters. There are 3 superlatives in that subhead. The greatest art heist in world history. The value of the 13 pieces, 4 or 5 masterpieces, is anywhere from 500 million to $1 billion. The world's greatest art, that's beyond. You don't know Boston, but 128 is a highway that surrounds Boston. That's beyond 128. That's beyond in the east and the southwest and the entire. It's for all time. This is the greatest art theft ever, and it sort of consumed my life after I wrote about it for about 5 or 6 years at the Globe, and was able to convince the museum that they needed to get the public's help. And the one way of getting the public, because the case has been investigated by the FBI from day one, and they gave me their records on the case, which gave me a head start for my book, which I wrote during the year of 2014. I did a lot of reporting that year, as well as writing the book. And at the core of the book is a question of who would want to steal the artwork of the ages when at the outset you can't sell them. That dilemma has a couple of possibilities. One is a criminal, a head of a criminal gang of whatever, who cannot live with, who feels that he just needs to have a masterpiece like one of these that was stolen on March 18th, 1990. The other possibility was that it was done for insurance, that whatever was stolen would the museum would pay riches to get them back. And they would be covered for their reimbursement by the insurance. That, however, was on the second day after the theft. That possibility was rejected or nixed, because it was determined that the museum, because it had fallen on hard times, had no replacement insurance. They had slip and fall insurance, but no replacement insurance. And I spent a lot of time in thinking about that. I think had they had insurance, had they been paying $100,000, $500,000, $1 million for an insurance policy a year, they would have never suffered this loss, because with an insurance policy of that magnitude, it would have had adjusters and safety specialists combing through the museum. in making sure it had the latest equipment for safety, for alarms, and as well as top flight security specialists, which, as you'll see, as I tell the story, you'll see it was a far distant from what they had guarding their 7,500 pieces of artwork that were displayed at the museum. I want to just go back to the richness of the artwork. As I said, there's only really 13 pieces were stolen. There are only four or five masterpieces. This is what is considered the true masterpiece. It's a Vermeer, the concert. There's only one Vermeer missing from his inventory of 35 or 36 paintings that he completed, and that's this one, stolen from the second floor Dutch room of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. This is what, if you had been lucky enough to be gone through the museum, it would be the one that its loss, I think, would cause the greatest ache. This is a Rembrandt. Rembrandt was much more prolific, maybe 500 paintings and sketches. But this is the only time he painted the sea, storm on the sea, Christ in the storm of the Sea of Galilee. It's a painting out of the New Testament. You can see Christ here, and if you can blow it up, you'll see he's while all of his disciples around in the skiff are frightened and show the fright on their face. Christ is faces in repose. Rembrandt, I think, liked the painting so much that he painted himself in the painting, and I think that's he right here. The museum had a little ribbon in front of the painting when it hung on the second floor Dutch room, because the art lovers and art specialists who knew that which one was Rembrandt, which I'm having trouble focusing on, they would come up and their finger would touch the canvas, and it would cause a little bit of an alarm, which was plugged into a socket nearby to go off. And as I later learned, that alarm did go off that night, that the bad guys, the two thieves, pulled off their robbery. There's another Rembrandt, a more traditional posed lady and gentleman in black. And then the fourth one is this, a Manet, Chez Tortoni, and this is for those of you who may have an art background, it's a different kind of painting. This is a more personal painting, and which has gained that its difference has gained some interest among those people who have spent a lot of time in investigating. The real mystery about the taking of this painting, though, is that the museum had a piece of motion detector equipment on site. This is the transcript of what the motion detector was picking up and recording the night of the theft. As you can see, March 18th, 1:54 in the morning, 6 minutes before 2, someone's in the Dutch room, investigate. And this goes on for the entire 81 minutes that the bad guys were inside the museum. And you see their whereabouts, the bad guys, the two men. But you don't see them, interestingly enough, you don't see them inside the museum. This is the museum. This is the second floor Dutch room. and it's where the masterpieces were stolen. Well, that Manet, that small, that more personal portrait, that was stolen from the Blue Room down here, and there are no footsteps in the Blue Room that are recorded on the transcript of the bad guys being in. If I can, let me take a couple of minutes and tell you about the person whom the museum is named after, Isabella Stewart Gardner. When the museum opened in 1903, it was the richest collection of art in any one place owned by an individual or by an individual in America. Later, the Getty and the Barnes in Philadelphia museums would overtake the richness of the Gardner Museum. But like I say, this was an extraordinary jewel in our crown, in the United America's crown of culture. And she wanted it that way purposefully. She had come to Boston in the mid-19th century, married one of our wealthiest and most successful entrepreneurs, John Jack Gardner. One of his, they married in 1860. They had a son who lived until 3, and he passed away. Her doctors urged her husband, she loved to travel, and she did love art as well. The doctors urged her husband, Jack Gardner, to take her on a world excursion, which they did. And they traveled for the rest of their marriage until Jack died in the late 1870s. And they traveled the world over. And wherever they went, they began to buy art. And she got a transcendent belief about art. What she saw, it wasn't just the European capitals they went to. They went to the Middle East, they went to the Far East. And what she saw and gave her this transcendent view was that it's art that defines your culture, your nation. Everything passes, art endures. She absolutely believed in that. And she also knew that America had very little appreciation for art. So she and her husband, before he passed away, had decided that once they did grow older, that they would build a museum and outfit it with the artwork of the ages. And did they succeed? In 1903, when it opened, of course, it opened to headlines. This is a statue in front of the Boston's public library, and it's on one side of the entrance to the library is a statue to artistic achievement. On the other side, it's scientific achievement. But what I bring this up is because there are 8 artists listed on the stone pillars beside the artist with her palette. 6 of those artists, and these are artists of the ages, 6 of those artists have their work on display at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. So when it opened in 1903, she had only two mandates. One was it be free of charge. Why? She wanted to make the art that was in these, and excuse me for getting into this sort of more ethereal issues. I'll get back to it. The reason why I'll come back to it. But she wanted to make this art available to all of us. And you know, Massachusetts, like America, was divided then with the landed gentry and the new immigrants. And she wanted to convey the importance of art to the new immigrants. So she made it free of charge. The second was that 8th graders, she started a program that 8th graders in Boston, the Boston Public Schools, have to come. They have to take a class tour and they go filing bored silly out of their minds, except for that one effing kid who's starting to draw. And that kid was my father. When he came to America as an Armenian refugee from the genocide of 1915, they saw at the Watertown schools that he went to that he had an ability to draw a straight line. Terrific artist, became one of Boston's most well-known portrait artists. But when he went to art school nearby, about 3 miles away from the museum, he walked after school. He would walk to the museum and study the art, because what he told me, he said, you could get so close to it. You could see the lines, the lines being drawn on the art. This place was a jewel. It has been a jewel in Boston's crown. However, with her death in the 25, her will mandated, had a clause in it that said the museum had to stay as it were at the time of her death. Nothing could be changed. The walls, the tapestry, the statuary, the paintings, her desk that she wrote on, everything had to stay as it was. And the reason why I say that was regrettable was because the trustees who took over the running of the museum, all good men, cared about art, but they really didn't have the need to raise money for the museum, because the museum didn't need to buy new art. And as a result, during the ensuing decades, particularly by the 50s and 60s, the place was beginning to fray. The first security director told me before he retired, he said he would come in on hot mornings. They didn't have any central air conditioning. And he said, I would come in on summer mornings, and I'd have to put the windows up because the moisture had built up from the humidity on the paintings. And as you know, that's not a good thing. So he went to the directors, and they raised a $500,000. And by the mid 80s, they put in a central air conditioning. He then said, we need a fire alarm system, a sophisticated fire alarm system. Something will catch fire in a basket, and I won't know about it until it becomes a conflagration. So they didn't have any money for him to raise it. So he raised $50,000 on his own, and he raised the money to put in the fire alarm system. But it wasn't, it was not a fire, and it wasn't broken water pipes that caused the disaster that caused the greatest art theft in world history. It's these two. Hopefully I can get it up. There's a Boston expression called gonfalons, and that's just people who, just sort of are observers on everything and just waiting in the outskirts. And that's who these two guys were. These are them with their mustaches, fake mustaches, and this is they without the mustaches. So the museum, the theft happened on March 18, 1990. And I believe the bad guys will pick that date willfully, because the early morning hours were following the cleaning up of Boston from our annual St. Patrick's Day. And no matter where you go, enjoy St. Patrick's Day, it gets a little excessive. And the only problem with that sentence is the word little. It gets totally excessive in Boston. And so every cop is on the street. And my sense is that these two guys knew that the cops who would be doing the midnight to 6 o'clock shift patrolling would be working overtime, and they wouldn't be on their toes. They may not be on their toes, which may give them a better break. in pulling off this art theft. Well, as it turned out, they really didn't need any breaks. Because what they had going for them was this fella here. He was the lone security man, a lone man at the security desk. Two security men worked the midnight to 7:30 shift, and Rick was one of them. Rick answered the two men came to the side door of the museum, which is right here, and they rang the bell, which Rick heard at the security desk. This is a gentleman who worked other nights. Rick worked back here at the security desk, and Rick saw he had a closed circuit TV system, and he saw the two men at that side employee's entrance, and he was able to communicate with them. And he answered, what can I help you? And they said, we're Boston police. We're here to investigate a disturbance. And Rick had done, this is around 1 o'clock in the morning, a little bit before 12:45. Rick had done the first tour of the museum. There was another fellow who was also on duty that night. He had never worked that midnight shift. Maybe he had worked it once, but this was Rick's responsibility to make sure the place was safe. And Rick took the first shift, touring all the galleries and making sure everything was in ship shape condition, and it was. And so when he went back to his desk at 1 o'clock, he does some very strange things. One is he opens the back door, this back door here, he opens it, and nobody else working that shift ever opened that door after they took over the security desk. For whatever reason Rick did, he told me that he did it just to make sure the door was locked, but that doesn't make sense because it was held in place electronically. He didn't need to check to see if any bolt was there or in place, and he did that. And when the two men said that they were there to investigate a disturbance, Rick knew. He told me, I knew nothing was going on. I had done the shift. What were they talking about? And they said, we're here to let us in. And what Rick told me, and what flashed to his mind, is some kids who might have been drunk from St. Patrick's Day celebrating had jumped over the back security fence. They had an iron fence in the back of the museum, and they had gotten into the grounds in the back of the museum. And he thought, well, maybe somebody had seen those two kids jump over there, and that's why these cops were there. His handbook told him he's not supposed to let anybody in. He says, I knew that. I knew I wasn't supposed to let anybody in. But he said, I just thought I didn't have a camera in the back area where I'm presuming the kids were. So here were the cops saying they're there to investigate a disturbance. What do I know? So he makes two grievous errors. This is one of them. He buzzes them in, and they come into this area here. And they come around. This is the public area of the security room. Rick is back here. And the first thing they say to Rick is, who else is here? And Rick says, there's another guard. He's doing the patrol. Call him down. So Rick has a two-way radio. He calls the second security officer down to the room. And before he enters, they look at Rick, and he's again back here, and they say to him, hey, you look suspicious to us. Is there a warrant out for your arrest? And Rick knew there was no warrant out for his arrest, but they wanted him to leave the back area. They wanted him to leave there. And they said, come out here to where we are, and let's get a good look at you. And Rick knew by doing this, the only security to the outside world that was at the museum was an alarm that if you hit, that the police would be informed, that the private security firm that the museum had contracted with, it would be a lot. The world would know immediately that there was a trouble at the museum. And what they wanted to do was to get Rick away from there. And they said, and Rick did. Rick said to them, okay, and he stepped away from them. And when I had the chance to interview Rick, I said to him, Rick, why would you knew that it was a case in your mind, you think that they mistakenly believe you have a crime that you haven't shown up to court for. And he says, yeah, he says, I thought it was mistaken identity. And I said, why are you leaving your post? And he said, and he pointed to his breast pocket. And he said, I had a ticket that night to the Grateful Dead concert in Hartford, Connecticut. And you know, as reporters, what we do, you can go back in time, and March 18th, 1990, the Grateful Dead had first of 2 night appearances at the Rock and Roll Emporium in Hartford, Connecticut. And Rick loved it because Rick aspired. Rick did not aspire to be anything in security. He wanted to have a rock and roll band. And they put one together. They were playing at some of the seedier bars around Boston. And Rick said he loved the museum job, because it allowed him to rock and roll in the afternoon and rock and roll at night. And then he'd come down from his bandstand at 11:45 or midnight, jump in a cab. He said, I was often stoned, I was often drunk, but it didn't matter, because nothing ever happened at the museum except for March 18th, 1990. So that's in a nutshell, the crime itself. And the investigation was quickly taken over by the FBI, and they have worked it valiantly. They answer every phone call. They chase down every lead. They've done a couple of searches on the basis of my reporting that I've done both for the Globe and myself. And all these years later, nothing has been, no one has been arrested, and nothing has been recovered. Yet the FBI maintains the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Boston has long had a public pledge, that they will not prosecute anyone if they come in willingly, cooperatively, and bring in the paintings. No matter how you got them, just bring them in. And we won't ask questions about how you gained access to them. And we will restore them to the best we can. And we'll drive you over to the museum, where the museum has had for at least a decade a $10 million reward outstanding on the return of the artwork in good condition. If you got 1 or 2, it wouldn't matter. The artwork would still, the museum would still be good on its promise. The story has taken on, yet still, we haven't got we haven't got a eureka. And the story has taken on mythic proportions. You may not know about it in Albuquerque, but last year's best nonfiction documentary on Netflix was a 4-part series built off of this theft called "This Is a Robbery." I would recommend it to anyone. It's a story filled with fascinating people, fascinating anecdotal material on who the bad guys might have been, why the theft was pulled off. As I began my work in 2014, I looked over the forensic evidence very closely, and that included this. This is a painting. This is a piece of art. This is the floor of the Dutch room, and this here, this is a Rembrandt, and this is a Rembrandt. This was thought to be a Rembrandt, a smaller painting. It was not a Rembrandt. This was the Vermeer that was taken. So, and all the glass fronts are broken. All the frames are broken. All the canvases are cut out of or removed from the backings of the frames, and the two large Rembrandts are cut out of their stretchers. So when I saw that, I said there can't be. No one who commissioned this theft, who got these two idiots to go in there, would have tolerated them to have damaged the artwork. It had to be something else. And as I moved my way through the criminal underworld, I heard a common refrain: artwork like this is a get out of jail free card. And we're not talking the monopoly. We're talking these kinds of people. This is in the mid 80s, Boston's criminal underworld was opened up for bidding because the crime family that had owned it or controlled it had been taken down by indictment, and two gangs, one of which was controlled by this guy, a guy named Vinnie Ferrara, was at war with another gang by another mobster named Frank Salemi. Well, Ferrara's driver and sort of jokester who hung around him was a guy named Bobby Donati. And as it turned out, as I began my reporting, I learned that Bobby Donati had a history in art theft. He had, back in the early 70s, he had teamed up with this rascal, a guy named Miles Connor. Miles Connor was, brought up in a nice neighborhood of Boston. Father was a police chief. Brother was a priest, but he was bad. He's just a bad guy. And when he wasn't stealing, it wasn't robbing banks, he was breaking into houses and stealing china and diamonds. Well, he learned of an estate up in Maine that was owned by the Woolworth family, and he broke in with a partner, and they stole 5 Wyeth paintings, 5 or 6 Wyeth paintings. Not Andrew, the father, N.C. Wyeth, and this happened around 1972. And Miles took control of the paintings and brought them down to Boston. And this is his arrest. He said he had found the perfect fence. Well, the perfect fence turned out to be a perfect FBI agent who arrested him. And Miles went to jail, was facing an 8-year prison term. And he later told me, as he was walking into this arraignment, a state cop yelled out at him, "You're going to need a Rembrandt to get yourself out of this one, Miles." And it gave Miles the idea. So when Miles got bailed out, he and his pals, a couple of months later, went to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston with guns, and it's just the way the usual thefts happen. Break in and, you force a guard on his knees, and you take the painting that you wanted. Well, he took a Rembrandt, hid it under a girlfriend's bed for 1.5 years, and then called his lawyer and said, listen, tell the feds if they go easy on me on that Maine estate robbery, I'll give them back their Rembrandt. And it says on 1975. The FBI says to his lawyer, we don't do deals, just bring back the painting. And you can tell it to the judge. So Miles brings the painting back. He goes in front of the judge. He gets 8 years for the for the robbery in Maine, and he gets another 8 years for the MFA robbery. But the judge lets him serve this 2 sentences coterminously, as if it's one 8-year sentence. And because of that, the one 8-year sentence, the bad guys in Boston begin to believe that if you steal something so important that you can claim yourself out of jail. Well, Miles's partner in that deal was this guy, was Bobby Donati. Miles also had a rock and roll band. Donati loved rock and roll, so he would hang out with Miles. And Donati was his partner, according to Miles, on that robbery. And as I was new stuff, working furiously in the summer of 2014 to finish my book, I got a call from Vinny's, from a very close person to Ferrara, and he says to me, I understand you're working on a book. I am. Tell me who you think did it. And I said, well, the feds think it's this guy or that guy. And he says, no, it was done by Bobby Donati, and he did it to get Vinny Ferrara out of jail. And I said, what do you mean? He said, Vinny Ferrara did not want to get involved in that caper with Bobby Donati. Donati was a fuck up, and he would screw everything up. So Ferrara had said to him, I don't want to have anything to do with you. The feds to now believe, the account is in my book, which, as I say, came out in 2014. The feds, had no comment on the revelation that's in my book. But in a recent story that was in the Globe that I was responsible for regarding, let me get this guy here, it said that that Donati, among the 13 pieces that Donati stole, was a top of a flagpole. Silly thing. Why you'd go to any effort to steal it, but they had tried to steal this Napoleonic banner, but they couldn't get it. So they took this finial. And I learned 2 years ago that the finial, after the theft was taken, after the theft went down, the finial was brought in to a, I don't have his picture, to a Boston jeweler who on the record told me that Bobby Donati had brought it in, shown it to him, asked him to appraise it. And he said, are you crazy? Why would I put my hand on that? It's hotter than a stolen Mona Lisa. I don't want to have anything to do with it. So Donati left, and Donati was savagely killed within a year. My sense is that he was killed because he may have sold a piece or two. He may have even sold one of the 2 of the masterpieces, but it wasn't like a sale to, he didn't know big people. The only person he knew who was big, who had any substance, was Vinny Ferrara. And because he didn't have a big field of people who would buy from him, he had to go and get a dime on the dollar of the artwork. Like I say, 33 years later, nothing has been found, nothing has been recovered. And I see that being such a tragedy for this city that has grown so enormously since 1990. Yes, 1990, Boston, the Red Sox still hadn't won its first World Series since 1918. We were still in the shadows of the other great cities in this country. But it has had immense recovery. And no longer is it at all controlled by the mob, by mobsters like Vinny Ferrara, or Salemi, or any of the screwballs who had major impact on the city. So I try to figure it out as I finish my book in 2014. Can I make a major impact? You know, I think I've gotten as close to I can to who pulled it off and why they pulled it off. But somewhere artwork that is of the ages continues to muster. I do not think, I think that Donati probably stashed it somewhere or gave it to someone who stashed it somewhere. And that's where it remains all these years later. So what I've come upon the summer of 2014 prompted me to do it as I wrote the book. That was the summer of the Ice Bucket Challenge. Boston was if you haven't heard of it, look it up on YouTube. Kids took because of a local collegiate baseball hero had contracted ALS. He and his friends put together a social media campaign where friends would pour ice over their head. This is during the summer. And they would urge their friends to contribute to ALS research. You know, ALS is the Lou Gehrig's disease. And that summer alone, the success of that social media campaign was extraordinary. They didn't have any PR people. I know the PR person the guy who did PR for them was the grandfather. He had been an editor at the Globe, and I called him up. I said, Jerry, how did this thing get going? He said it was just the two men who had the disease. They said, how can we raise money for research? They raised $80 million in 2 months of 2014. The previous year in 2013, those 2 months, they had gotten $4 million. So the success of a social media campaign awaits. I have gone on television, I've written about it, I've spoken on radio, and some show it. The museum has shown no interest in doing it. The FBI certainly doesn't want anybody to steal their thunder, so they haven't put it out. But this is what I would do. I would put, you go into the Dutch room at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. This is what your first sight is. The empty frame, because as I said, she wanted the museum to stay as it was. So they had to put the empty frames. They couldn't fill them. They had to put the empty frames back. This is the Storm of the Sea of Galilee, and this is the Vermeer. It's either this or on the other side, within 10 yards of each other. And when you go into this room where the majesty of art is displayed, you feel that you're the first person at a wake. The feeling of solemnity, of loss, is overwhelming. And so what I've urged the museum to do is put in front of these, at the next anniversary, put in front of these frames, not the trustees and not the investigators, not the FBI. You're members of the have-not. We're all members of the have society, as they are. The people who know anything are the have-nots, and they don't listen to people who are on the other side, who are the haves of society. How do you get those people who are in those fewer neighborhoods that are residents who have not had anything, who have lived by life, the omerta, which is silence, snitches get stitches, code of ethics. How do you get them to open up, to help in this loss? And I said, put in front of those frames our cardinal. Cardinal O'Malley has helped remedy the clergy abuse crisis that started here in Boston. that I had a hand in helping keep rolling. Have him in front of these frames and have him say something like, we have to get these paintings back. She put them on the walls for us. Remember back on in my earlier part of my talk, I said, this is why she put them on the wall, so the immigrants of our society could come see it, could be inspired by the great art of the ages, and my underlining on emphasis on that is, we don't know where the next Van Gogh, Rembrandt, Vermeer comes from. It could be one of your children. And it doesn't have to be the have or have nots. It can be anybody can have that drop of iodine. I tried to figure, I looked at my father as he worked. How the hell does he do that? It's just that drop of mercurochrome. Those of us who are old enough to remember that wonder all of remedies that he or she has. And it doesn't matter what neighborhood you come from, what schools you went to, what family you grew up in. All you had to do was be inspired by the art of the ages. And that's what I have the calling on, is to challenge Boston, to show we are a world-class city. I'll end with this. In the Super Bowl of 2018, Tom Brady beat Atlanta with comeback victory, and is in Houston. And he went, you come to Boston, so many kids want to come to Boston only because this is where Tom Brady played. So you can imagine the sense of excitement that what went on in Boston that night. Well, by midnight, after the victory, the word started in Boston that Tom Brady's game jersey had been stolen from the locker room. And it went like wildfire. The word went like wildfire. That's all anybody heard about the next day. Tom Brady's game jersey has been stolen from him. Well, Boston cared about Tom Brady's. We had marches. Kids were marching on the streets of Boston, torchlight parades. Get Tom Brady's jersey, get back. We cared about something. We with that intense, it came back. The FBI found it. A fake reporter had stolen it out of. He had gotten his way into the locker room, and he had wound up in Mexico City, and they arrested him and got the jersey back within 2 days. But the point I'm making is the intensity that Boston cares, and that care for the intensity of caring about Tom Brady's jersey, that's what needs to be brought to this venture. This is our legacy. This is what we pass on to our children, and that it's missing. We're not due to call ourselves a world-class city until we get those paintings returned. So that's why I continue to say, so enthused about the story. It's become a mission for me. And hopefully you'll pick up a paper and inside on your, in your Albuquerque Journal, and maybe on page 3 in a month or 2 months or 6 months or 10 years, you'll see Gardner paintings found. That's what we're hoping for here in Boston. So thank you very much. Thank you, Leonie, for having me. And I'll take any questions you might have.